Okay, we're rolling.
Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you. Hope you're doing well. Episode 693. We're getting close to 700. Oofa. Right? It's getting close. Wow. I don't know what we're going to do for episode 700 yet. I'm still working on it. So if you have any ideas, let me know. Howtopodcast.ca. Hurry up because I got to record that episode soon. So yeah, 700 episodes. That's pretty impressive. I'm pretty happy with that. Excited that we can do this together. And this 365 days of content, it's a lot of work, by the way. It's a lot of work. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying having time with you. So thank you for making time for this. I appreciate it. First time here. Wow, you got a bunch of episodes to go back and listen to. So yeah, enjoy. Let me know when you're done. That would be interesting. I want to talk a little bit about a conversation I had with a podcaster this week. And we were kind of going through some of their disappointment in their podcast and trying to uncover and deconstruct what was going on with their show. They are getting downloads. They've been podcasting for a while. They're not getting a lot of engagement around their podcast. And we kind of, I think, touched on a few things that I haven't heard combined into one episode like this that I think a lot of podcasters could benefit from. So as I'm talking to them and helping them with their show, I'm thinking of you and thinking maybe you also are feeling the exact same way as this podcaster, and maybe this has been your experience as well. So I want to talk about how your listener engagement is low, right? We see that, and you're not getting those responses to the things you put in front of your audience, to leave you a message or buy you a coffee or leave you a speak pipe or sign up for your newsletter. And it's like, why are these things happening? And why is my audience so disconnected from my show? What am I doing wrong? This can vary across the board. There's not one answer for this. This podcaster, I'll explain what we did together, and we're going to monitor it now for a month to see what happens after this has been all put into place, because you need to test and measure. It's really important in everything. In podcasting, test and measure. Make small tweaks. Don't do a lot of tweaks at the same time, and measure what you've done and see if you see a result. And if not, then change something else and measure that and see if you get a result. That's how you know how to hone your podcast or content and your audience so that you can get better results for your show. So I'm glad you're here. Ready? Let's get into this. So let's just talk a little bit of basics around what constitutes a play and a stat in your analytics. So when you go to your hosting site, for me, it'll be Captivate, Buzzsprout, or Spotify for Creators. Those are the three that I'm using across my 9 shows. When I go to these hosting sites where my podcast is hosted, I can go in and see what's happened in the last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, or all for everything. Or I can do my own personal search and pick out certain dates and weeks or months, whatever I want to do. But in general, I go there to see my analytics, where people are listening from, how many listens I have. And it's not bulletproof, it's not perfect, but it's a kind of a litmus test of what's happening with your show. So don't be too obsessed with the numbers you see, because they're not exactly perfect. Just keep that in mind. And always check and double check your stats on your hosting site compared to going directly to Apple and seeing what's happening on Apple. Apple's going to tell you what's happening on their own platform better than your hosting site will. Apple has more data than your Buzzsprout account. Apple has more data than your Captivate account or your Spotify or your Libsyn or your Blueberry or your whatever. Apple has their own data from their own platform just for Apple. So I would trust that a little bit more than I would when I look at my hosting sites. There's some back and forth on that, but keep that in mind. Now, what constitutes a listen, a download, a play? All these different terms we use in podcasting. Remember, first of all, that a download doesn't always mean that somebody actually played the episode. Could be a file, just the fact that a file transferred from a server to your device, to your phone, your computer. That's it. It sits there, never been played. You delete it, you move on. Nobody heard the episode, right? That's a download. Not technically played, not technically easy to measure. It was the file was actually downloaded to your phone. That's one thing. Second, we call it plays. We call it listens. You'll hear a bunch of people explain it in different contexts and with different terminology. Basically, when somebody actually interacts with your podcast and they hit play on the episode, for most of the audio apps that you're going to see out there, the general consensus, there's kind of this ruling body for podcasters called the IAB, and they kind of set ground rules on what constitutes a play, what's not a play, what's a bot, what's not a bot, what's a human, what's a computer listening to your show. They have all these rules. So they set these guidelines, and they're saying basically that a minute of playable time constitutes the fact that somebody's actually interacted with your show. 1 minute, 60 seconds. That's it. You have a 45-minute podcast, 44 minutes could be totally unheard, but you still got credit for that listen, download, play, fill in the blank. That's kind of the standard in podcasting. Jump over to YouTube, it's a totally different ballgame, because YouTube can basically count whatever they count. They're not really open with this, but I'm anticipating from listening to other people who are more in the YouTube world than I am, that it's even less than 60 seconds, maybe even less than a second, like a microsecond. So, when you watch a video on YouTube and it automatically starts to play the next one and you didn't press play on the next one, yeah, they already got a download or listen or a view because you didn't hit stop fast enough. So when we look at the numbers that come from YouTube, they're based on a shorter retention time, a shorter amount of time of the episode being played compared to a longer period of time on an audio app. So those two numbers don't match. So 100 views on YouTube could be 100 seconds, and 100 views on your podcast could be 100 minutes. There's a difference there. So when you compare seconds to minutes, it's not the same thing. So you got to do some funky math. You got to do all this kind of stuff behind the scenes to combine a YouTube number with your Apple or Spotify or Audible number. They're not the same. Apples and oranges. What if, we're on the topic of percentage of time spent with your podcast, what if it was a little bit different? Instead of 60 seconds, what if it was a percentage of the episode that was played? Think about that. Imagine if a play, a listen, a download, whatever you want to call it, was based on the time that people spent with the episode. So they had to listen to 25% of the episode. So if you have a longer episode, they have to listen to 25% of the total length of the show. Shorter episodes, 25%, same thing. 25%, maybe 50%. What if it was 75, 85, 90% had to be listened to before it counted as a play? You would see podcasters lose their mind because the retention rates are not that great, especially for YouTube. You're not going to get that kind of engagement for the most part because YouTube's a different experience than an audio podcast. If it was based on the percentage of the time that people listened, I think we'd have a clearer view into the world of our listeners and viewers because it's based on how long they stuck around, not the fact that they hit their play button for a minute or a second, and that counts as consumption. It's not real. It's not really impressive as well. It would be a huge change to podcasting if we went with a percentage of episodes. Think about this. If you had a 1 minute podcast and 1 minute is the length of time in an audio podcast that counts as a listen based on the standards from the IAB, then your play time would be 100% consumption because they listen from the beginning to the end for that whole 60 seconds and they're done. So all of us should just create 1 minute podcasts so that we can get 1 minute of listen time, which would count as a listen, would count in our stats, and we'd have 100% completion rate. It would be great. There's not a lot of room in there in a minute to squeeze in a bunch of ads and intros and outros and music and talking about the weather, all that stuff. We couldn't fit all that in there. That would be interesting. So the people that have a long podcast and they only have 1 minute of play, they're actually got really bad retention rates because people are coming and leaving before they get into any of the content. Yet, you still got to listen. It's kind of weird. Now, when we're working with this podcaster, what we were discovering as we went through their Apple backend and their Spotify backend was that their retention rates really dropped off in the first 15 to 20% of the episode. Good at the beginning, all starts at 100. Everybody starts at 100%. When that episode goes live, what happens after that? That's up to you, the content, the listener, their schedule, what they're doing in the moment. Maybe they got to the end of their commute, the end of their walk, and they hit stop. It's nothing to do with your content in that case. It's just they're done doing the task they were doing when they were listening to you, and they've moved on. It's not you. It's not your content. It's their schedule. It's their availability that cut you off at a certain point. And there's nothing you can do about that. We just got to create engaging content. So we keep people as long as possible. So that's one of the things. So when we looked at this together as with this podcaster, we realized that their 30-minute episode at the 15-minute mark, 10-minute mark, 15-minute mark, that's where people are starting to leave the show. And the host of this podcast was doing their call to action, pathway to engagement, at the very, very end of the episode. Like at the very end. They said goodbye. They were done. They're wrapping up. They're closing up shop. And it's like, oh, and by the way, please go sign up for my newsletter, or please buy me a coffee, or whatever it was. And when we looked at the percentage of people listening at that moment in time, it was almost no one based on the stats for that episode where they were talking about. So that's the reason why nobody's responding to their call to action, because there's nobody really there. One person, 5 people out of hundreds of people were still there at the end of the episode. And out of that very tiny amount of people, only a small percentage of them will ever reach out. So it's almost microscopic, the size of their audience at the end of the episode. So our challenge together was to look at how can we get people to listen longer to this podcast? And maybe we need to move where we do our call to action, where we do the next step for the listener, so that we're talking to people that are still in the room. If you're talking to an empty room, nobody's going to respond to your call to action. When you get up in front of an empty room and say, I would love for everyone here to buy my book, and there's nobody there, nobody's buying your book. That's just a fact. You want to talk to a full room, not an empty room. So if we imagine our podcast as a room with desks and chairs where there's a person up speaking at the front of the class and there's people seated in the seats, and as students, for example, the bell goes, the big class starts, teacher gets up and starts talking, the room is full. But as the teacher talks, people get up, they grab their stuff and they leave. And near the end of the class session, the teacher looks up from their books and they're reading from their script, and there's nobody in the room. Everybody has gone. How impactful is that teacher when there's no one in the room? How impactful are you when you look at your retention rates and there's nobody after the halfway point, 3/4 of the way through your show? There's nobody left. What do we do? What do we do when everybody walks out of our podcast? How do we compensate for that? So in the case of the podcaster I was talking about earlier, what we're going to be working on then is figuring out if maybe the episode is too long. Maybe if it's an hour, maybe we cut it down to 30 minutes or 45. Also, is the content relevant? Are we meeting the expectation of our audience? The title was the promise. The episode is the proof, is the result. So are we giving them what we told them they were giving them? Are we meeting their expectations? The other part is, as the host, are you just engaging enough for people to stick through and listen? as listeners come to your show, they can only retain so much information before they just start checking out. Maybe your podcast is just too heavy in the content and the length and the amount of topics that you cover. Maybe splitting your show from a 60-minute episode into 3 20-minute episodes might be better. If 20 minutes seems to be the sweet spot for your listenership, then maybe that's better. Or stay with your 60-minute episode, but move your call to action from the last 10 seconds of the show, maybe more to the middle, maybe more to the beginning, or more to just after, maybe 3/4 of the way through, but definitely not at the very end if there's nobody there. So when we talk about wrestling with nobody's listening to my show, nobody's giving me feedback, that's a reaction. You're reacting as a podcaster to the fact that your engagement levels are so low. But you might be able to fix this. And you can only fix what you measure. So if you're not measuring this, you're not going to Apple, you're not going to Spotify, you're not going to YouTube, and you're not going to your podcast hosting site. How are you making decisions? How are you deciding what's right for your next episode? How are you deciding if you're connecting with your audience? To complain about people not responding to you when you put the request for response for your audience at the very, very end when everyone's left, that's on you. That's on you. You can see exactly where your audience starts to drop off. And I think a survey would really help you if you've been podcasting for a while and you've kind of built up the trust of your audience to be receptive and respond to you. Putting that in front of them. I have a survey up for this show. And I hope over 693 episodes, I've earned your trust enough to go and take a look at that survey and give me some feedback. But put a survey out and find out from your audience where the gaps are. Steal my survey as an example. I just set it up on Google with Google Forms, and it's connected to a Google Sheet. So as you fill out the form, all the information you put into the answers go right into a sortable, shared Google Sheet. And all my responses are captured. I just go to the sheet and see how often it gets updated with new content from you. So set that. It's totally free. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to go get an account. You don't have to pay for any of this. It's all free. Set it up, create the link, put it out in your show notes, put it on your website, and tell people about it, like I'm doing right now. The How to Podcast survey is out. And I need your responses. I'd love to hear from you. Keep responding, keep replying to people, and keep putting it in front of everyone that you have this survey. It's really going to help you. Find out where your audience is dropping off. Go to Apple backend, go to Spotify's backend, and go to YouTube. Because you're not going to see this on your hosting site. They don't have vision to this. Only those proprietary walled gardens. All 3 of them are walled gardens. Yes, even Apple, everybody, is a walled garden. All of these sites, they can give you information about the users on their platform that nobody else can see. So use that data. And if you're like, I'm still, Dave, as you talk about this, it's starting to make sense, but I still need to kind of go over what I think is unique for my show. And do you have time? Well, yeah. On my howtopodcast.ca website is my calendar link. It's there. I would remove it if I didn't want to talk to you. It's always there. It's always free. And I'd love to help you. I'm not going to sell you anything. It's not a funnel. It's not a bait and switch. I'm not here to trick you. I'm here to help you. And unlike other people who hide their stuff behind a paywall, their community behind a paywall, their services behind a paywall, I don't. I put it out there for you. So if you need help, let me know. Reach out to me. And I'd love to be part of your solution for your show. Just talking it through might be just all you need to come up with your best next step. So reach out to me anytime. Love to help you. Let's move that call to action to where the people are. Stop talking to an empty room. And stop complaining that nobody's responding to your stuff when nobody hears what you're asking them to do. You need to move that request to where the people are, not to the empty seats that are in front of you at the end of the episode. It's time to do something different. If you're not happy with the results, it's time to make a change. And I'm here to help you with it. howtopodcast.ca. See you tomorrow. So here at the How to Podcast series, we love to hear from you. You might think that we get a lot of feedback. Man, we don't. We don't get a lot because people just feel like, why bother? Like, why? Does Dave really care what I have to say? And I do. I actually do really care what you have to say. I love your input. I love hearing from you. And we've started a survey for our listening audience, which includes you right here, right now. And I'd love, love, love for you to head over to howtopodcast.ca. And you'll see our survey right there on our website. And take a few minutes, come through, answer the thoughtful questions we're asking of you to make the show better. Not just for you, but for everyone. Your feedback is really going to help shape the show. And I selfishly just want to hear from you. So if you're thinking, Dave probably already knows what I think, I don't. I really don't. I'm not good at reading minds. My wife will confirm that completely. So I don't really know what you think of the show. I don't know if you like it, if you like how long the show is, how long the episodes are, that Dave's doing 365 episodes in a year. Oh my gosh. Like, I would love to hear from you and get your thoughts on this very show right here. So head over to howtopodcast.ca, click on our survey link. It's also in the show notes for every episode, in the most recent episodes, and I'd love to hear from you. So as a listener of this here very show, your feedback can make this show so much better. So much better. And I'm not drowning in emails and voice messages and speak pipes and buy me a coffees right now. So I'm putting the ask out to you right now, as a listener of the show, and you're still here, that you take a moment, head over to our website, click the link in the show notes for any episode, and go to our survey and let us know your thoughts about this show, how it could be better, and what you love, and what you're like, Dave, can you stop doing this? That would be really helpful. Thanks for being here and being part of the How to Podcast family. See you over at howtopodcast.ca. Talk soon. Thanks for being here. Bye. You're still here. Awesome. I was on a podcast recently and as a guest, and the host asked me a question, and it was around my background in HR, human resources, and how that helps me as a podcaster. And I was talking about my interviewing skills because part of my job was job placement. So I had to interview a ton of people at job fairs and in the office and trying to place people in the right job for them based on their skill sets. So I have to, in a short amount of time, meet, engage with, and connect with somebody for a job interview. And it was a skill that I love doing. I really learned a lot, and I helped a lot of people find work, which is very rewarding, right? And so that was my thing. And I was just mentioning in that as an example that for me, I would say to people when I'm meeting with them, what is your red door? And the response was, what are you talking about? Why would you ask me a question like that in a job interview? What's my red door? It doesn't make any sense at all. And I told a story then to substantiate that question in this interview on this podcast. And I just talked about the fact that when my wife and I would go looking at real estate, you see a lot of houses. The real estate agent throws you in their car and drives you around the city, and you look at multiple houses. You start to lose track. Was the house that we liked the one with the pool in the backyard? Did it have the garage attached or detached? Was it the second story? Did it have 3 bedrooms or 4? Was the kitchen white or blue? You start to lose track, right? You see so many houses. But when you can pinpoint on one thing that's unique about the house, then you're like, oh, yeah. So the example I shared was, well, it's the house with the red door. Oh, I remember the house with the red door. That was in the neighborhood with the school across the street. Yeah, that's the one. Now we both know what we're talking about. Something stood out in the moment that was memorable. So what I said to these people in the job interviews was, I just want to know what your red door is. I have a stack of resumes in front of me of all these other people I got to talk to about this job. What makes you stand out? What's your red door? What's memorable about this conversation that I'm going to remember after you leave the office today and we part ways? When I'm sitting down to place people in this position. How am I going to remember you? What's special about you that's going to be memorable? And the host of the show was like, I love your use of stories. And really, in the moment, I didn't even think of them as stories. I thought of more of an example. But it is a story. And stories connect. Stories get better the more that you tell them. There's stories in your brain. There's examples in your mind and in your background that really help people solidify what you're saying. So instead of reading me 4 facts, 4 steps, 3 action items, 2 ways to do this, put a story in there. People remember stories. It becomes their red door. So my question for you is, in your next episode, what is your red door? What is going to make your podcast so remarkable and so memorable that people will be thinking about it long after the episode stops? Like they'll be mulling it over on their way to work, while they're standing in line to get their food, while they're out for the walk with the dog and they're not listening to anything, but they're just contemplating what you said in the last episode. They're still thinking about it. That's a stat that you're never going to see. Somebody who mulls over your conversation in your podcast for days, thinking about it. You know, cows, I'm doing it right now. Here we go again. Cows, how they chew on their cud. They're just like chewing away, they just don't stop chewing, right? They're just kind of mulling it over, just chewing on it. People do that with your podcast when it's memorable. This is not Instagram stories that are here for 24 hours and gone. This is not swiping with your thumbs through TikTok. This is podcasting. It's much different. So let people mull over stuff. Give them something that becomes their red door, and how they remember you outside of all of the other podcasts and all the other distractions in life. They're thinking about you and anticipating you the next time they get time with you, because you make them think. Give them a red door, and you'll keep an audience for a long time. Let me know if you need any help with this. Tell better stories. Stories get better the more you tell them. Tell more stories. See you tomorrow.